2023 was an amazing year for music. We got not one, but two Billy Woods albums. The Beatles finally shared their long-awaited final song featuring a demo of John Lennon, which the rest of the band worked on. Charli XCX got engaged. As artificial intelligence has become more mainstream in the music industry, a bunch of artists have vocally spoken out against it and are working with legislators to create regulations that'll help keep this AI thing under control. Other musicians are using their voice to speak out against atrocities that are happening in Palestine. And last but not least, the hit breakout single of the summer was a diss track against Target.
Target, yeah they targeting. Target, yeah they target kids.
I will have to admit that the main hook is a little bit catchy. I'm Julia, and these are my favorite albums from 2023. Okay, so we're starting off our list with Billy Woods. Woo! Billy is back in full force, and Maps is a really great collaboration with producer Kenny Segal. It really highlights a lot of his abstract hip-hop, I guess if you want to use that term. I'm not too fond of it, but he just has this awesome way of rapping that almost sounds like he's kind of talking to you, but like he's also rapping, if that makes sense. It's like a really interesting mixture. His flow is awesome, the lyrics are awesome, the features are great. Danny Brown's on one of the tracks, kills it. Absolutely nails it. Yeah, it was just a really fun listen, and I definitely see myself coming back to this over and over and again in the future. Okay, and number 24, we have 10,000 GEKS. I'm like legally required to put this on the list because it's practically transcoded. It's still a very fun, high-energy album. Okay, at number 23, we have Satisfaction by Spy. Shout out to Jordan from Lunchbox Records for putting me on this. It's only 11 minutes long, but it is some good-ass hardcore. At number 22, we have Drifting by Met Henriette. What can I say? I'm a sucker for a good cello, saxophone, and piano trio. At number 21, we have Haunted Mountain by Buck Meek from Big Thief. It's a really relaxing side project that has a lot of really great storytelling and its writing, like on Cyclades. I think I'm saying that right. I don't know, I don't speak Greek. Definitely give it a listen if you're a fan of Big Thief or alternative country in general. Okay, number 20 is the all too well known Scaring the Hose by JPEG Mafia and Danny Brown. This album is a very high quality and addictive caffeine rush. There's just so much stuff thrown at the listener, courtesy of Peggy, and there's so many hilarious bars, courtesy of Danny. That being said, JPEG Mafia fans are also some of the most insufferable people on God's green earth. I love this project for its chronically online identity, but I feel like the Twitter discourse surrounding this, Peggy included, really moved me off the album as more time passed. It's still a good record, but the context around it kind of knocked it down a few pegs for me. It's still a good record, but the context surrounding it kind of ruined it just a teensy bit for me. Okay, number 19, The Rise and Fall of the Noah's Princess by Chappell Roan. Chappell Roan is a breakout artist who lends a really unique and explicit voice to the current pop landscape without necessarily combining with the blandness and monotony of things that came out this year. I'm looking at you, Sam Smith and Charli XCX. I mean, if you need proof, this is literally the hooks to one of her songs, and it is catchy as hell. At number 18, we have Michael by Atlanta MC, Killer Mike. I'm going to be perfectly honest, I'm not necessarily a big fan of this one line, but given this one low, I think the rest of the album is full of so many highs, and I think the whole concept of telling an autobiography about yourself through the lens of an album is a really interesting idea that Killer Mike's able to do really well, interwoven with this sort of Southern gospel sound throughout. This kind of whole autobiographical narrative is a really interesting way of looking at his life and how it relates to who he is as a person today, especially given the context of him being in Run the Jewels. I also saw him play this album live, and I thought it was amazing how he was able to translate the contents of this album to the live environment really soulfully. Okay, number 18 is Struggler by Genesis Owusu. I did not know what to expect from this album, and initially I was kind of put off by it, but a few months later I realized that I had a big hole in my heart that can only be filled by a neo-soul album that revolved around a cockroach that was loosely inspired off Franz Kafka's Metamorphosis. And Struggler filled that hole. The album is a lot of fun to listen to. Owusu has a really energetic delivery with all of his bars, and he does a lot of singing on it too. It's really creative. It's really fun. I was supposed to see this live, but then the venue it was being held at decided to have roof issues. So yeah, why does this always happen to me? But something I was able to see live was number 17, which is Wednesday's newest release, Ratsaw God. All I can say about that show is that they did such a great job of taking the energy off that album and translating it to, once again, a live environment. Think of your favorite Lucinda Williams album, then mix that with shoegaze, and you've got Ratsaw God. Great album. At number 16, we have a nice set of songs from BCNR with Live at Bush Hall. I'm really happy to see the band continue headed in a positive direction even after Isaac left last year. These songs were created for touring purposes, so I can only imagine that once they get into the studio and actually come up with a narratively cohesive album, it's going to sound pretty good. So I'm very excited for whatever comes next from the band. Number 14, we have This Is Why by Paramore. It's really nice to see Haley and Co. reunited for a more moody set of songs that still carry the trademark Paramore charm with them. Point being, I'm really glad that Paramore is still around, and this release proves that they still have a lot of creative juices still flowing in them as a band. At number 13, we have La Hive by Sampha. So I'm not necessarily a Frank Ocean fan just because of the various stylistic distastes I have for his music. I just realized I probably should go ahead and lock my windows after saying that. That being said, I can proudly call myself a new fan of Sampha. This is one of my comfort albums in the sense that it's very toned down and mellow, but it's also very intentional in how it's written and how it's produced. There's very nice lyricism and instrumentation throughout, and I'm very excited to see where he goes next as an artist. Number 12, we have Danny Brown's other project of the year, Quaranta. While we did get Scaring the Hose earlier in the year, Quaranta's kind of like the polar opposite to that. Danny pauses his goofy antics for this release, and he does a lot of social commentary about the state of gentrification in Detroit, and he does a lot of reflection on himself as a person, where he came from, where he is right now. It's very sobering to see Danny be as vulnerable as he is on this release, and that's something that translates to the sound of this album as well. Compared to XXX or Atrocity Exhibition, this release definitely takes a step back. But I also just really love this flavor of Danny, and I'm glad that we got Quaranta. At number 11, we have I've Got Me in the Morning by New York singer-songwriter Joanna Sternberg. I first heard this album on June 29th when I was getting ready for a nurse to shove an IV in my veins. Point being, I was kind of freaked out. But thankfully, Joanna Sternberg was there for me. Thank you. Their newest release is really adorable, but it's also kind of mature and self-aware in its own way. I really appreciate it for what it is. Sternberg likes processing these emotions in a very simple way, which is something that's reflected really well on their newest set of songs. There isn't anything grand or groundbreaking about this album, and it's not like it's trying to make a huge statement. It's just a bunch of songs that are sometimes goofy and sometimes sad, and sometimes in that liminal space in between. And given the rest of the crazy stuff we've heard this year, I need an album like this. Okay, number 10, we have That Feels Good by Jessie Ware. I have been waiting for this album forever. When Pearls dropped earlier this year, I was like hooked. That was all I was playing for 2 weeks. And then Begin again dropped. That is my song of the year. Everything about the song is so perfect, from like this grand swelling of instrumentation to the chorus to the awesome backing vocals. Oh my god. While I personally don't think it's as good as What's Your Pleasure, I think it was really interesting to see Jessie take her disco sound and move it into a new direction by incorporating a lot of elements from boogie and Philly soul. The sound of this album is definitely less dramatic than What's Your Pleasure. It's very lively, it has a lot of fun songs. It's just a great listen to when you want to have a little dance party Friday night while you make cookies and burn them. Yeah, that happened to me. Number 9, we have Guts by Olivia Rodrigo. Ugh. Olivia Rodrigo seriously expands the foundations that she set on Sours with Gut. While the themes of this album are still concentrated on love and relationships, there's definitely an angrier and more mature tone that Olivia's grown into really well, while still retaining her iconic teenage charm. I love the crescendos a lot of these songs have, like Vampire or Lazy, which all come crashing down in this epic climax. I also think that his lyricism can be really tongue-in-cheek and hilarious, like we see on Getting Back. A major issue I have with modern pop albums is that so much of the album just feels like filler in between the big hits that generate the money for the artist. Thankfully, that's not the case with Olivia, as every single song on this release is super well thought out, super well produced, and just generally really catchy. Both as a person and as an artist, Olivia's demonstrated awesome growth, and I'm so excited to see where she goes next. At number 8, we have Beloved Paradise Jazz by McKinley Dixon. On this release, we see Dixon showing off his wit, his wordplay, and his potential on an album that proudly flaunts its jazz influences. The themes of this album are heavily inspired by Toni Morrison's works, and it's very interesting to see how her influences can coalesce in this very unique style of music. There's a lot of focus on world building, which is done by lush instrumentation, and there's a sort of community that's involved in the making of this album, which is demonstrated by the variety of awesome features. It's short, but it doesn't waste any time in getting to the quality stuff, unlike another certain album that came out this year. On number 7, we have Greater Wings by Julie Byrne, who is probably unrelated to David Byrne. Probably. On this release, Byrne takes on the themes of love, death, and nostalgia in a very floaty way, for lack of a better term. This was definitely my summer album of the year, and its calmness is really soothing, even in the face of great adversity. The joke is that I had 2 facial surgeries this year. Yeah, I spent a lot of time recovering from my surgeries in bed, and I listened to this album on repeat. It's just so nice and calm. Her vocals are just so soothing and pretty, and like, I get the whole album's supposed to be mourning the loss of someone, but I just can't help listening to it and feeling like someone's right there next to me in bed giving me a big warm hug. Definitely listen to this if you need someone to curl up with, or if you're just going to do it by yourself. At number 6, we have Helm Mode from pop-punk veteran Jeff Rosenstock. What I find insane about Rosenstock is that he's able to tackle everything from socioeconomic problems to breakups and feeling sad yet hopeful, all on the span of one record without making it bloated or longer than it needs to be. If this sounds jam-packed, that's because it is, but it's like the good kind of jam. Like, I'm talking Smuckers. It's a perfectly paced set of pop-punk tracks that all work together in a really awesome manner. All that I ask from you, Jeff, please do a ska version of Like You Better. Thank you. I'll be moving on. Number 5 is Why Does Our Earth Give Us People to Love? Cara Jackson's latest release came out of left field for a lot of people, myself included. I'm at this really weird stage right now where indie rock and indie folk has just kind of been a slog and a letdown for me, with I think the best example of this being the record by Boy Genius. She has a song called The Dickhead Blues. Do I need to say any more? Her voice is beautifully rich, and it's this warmth that lends itself really well to a unique, poetic style of songs. Like, I mean, she was the U.S. Poet Laureate for a while. The youth. Did I say that? I think I did. These poetic influences are seen on songs like Pawn Shop or No Fun / Party, or one of my favorites, Rat, which is a story of a guy who moved west and died because he was poor and made awful decisions. Thank you, Cara. Thank you for brightening my year. And number 4, we have Saved by the Reverend Christen Harper. So I've already kind of discussed this record very quickly on a previous video, but I grew up in a very toxic evangelical environment that caused just a teensy bit of trauma. No, it caused a lot of trauma. While I'm very much not in support of modern Christian music for its misogynistic themes, its queerphobia, or just its general awful song structure, like, I swear, every single Christian song sounds like the same 3 artists. I will say, I spent the better part of the summer, while I wasn't listening to the Greater Wings, listening to Appalachian folk hymns. One of the more well-known examples is Johnny Cash's Songs from My Mother's Hymn Book, which is something that I spin all summer long. There's just something so interesting about the lyricism. There's just something so interesting about this post-apocalyptic lyricism combined with a very mellow tune. What Christen Harper does on Saved and does really well is take all these obsessions that Christians have with Christ's blood and judgment and almost make a kind of satire of it. I mean, it is kind of satire. There's honesty in these songs, there's experimentation in the sound of these songs, but most importantly, there's growth. Haters left the stage name of Lingua Ignota for various mental health reasons, and I'm really glad to see her continue to experiment with piano-driven music, and I'm very excited, once again, to see what she does next, considering Sage was just so grand and dark and depressing, and all these emotions combined into one, but also lively. It was a very interesting experimentation. The point being, Saved is just a really interesting combination of old styles of folk Christian music, and I definitely think it's worth a listen if you like listening to weird, crazy stuff. And number 3, we have Desire, I Want to Turn Into You by Caroline Polachek. If you don't know who Caroline Polachek is, I'm going to show you a demo for one of her songs. Caroline's appeal lies in its absurdness, married with tight artistic control and stunning beauty. Okay, and number 2, we have Did You Know That There's a Tunnel Under Ocean Boulevard by Lana Del Rey. I don't have anything written on my script for this, so I'm just going to go ahead and free verse it. Yeah, this album is practically in her top 3, like up there with Norma and fucking Rockwell. I think what makes this album so special is that it allows us to get a glimpse into Lana Del Rey as a person, into her life, into her thoughts, into her, what's the word I'm looking for, her family. It's very personal in a way that Blue Banisters wasn't, but it's also very grand, and it's very relational. Like, there's a song on here that's dedicated to Jack Antonoff, who produced a lot of songs on this album, that's dedicated to his fiance, now wife. I love Lana's rich and sometimes sarcastic lyricism, and I think that even the whole structure of this album, with there being interludes of Judah Smith, a notorious pastor in LA, but are also being John Baptiste, it feels very surreal in the sense that there's like a camera that's pointed at someone's. It feels very candid in the sense that, like, there's a camera that's pointed at a random person and takes, like, a kind of vignette of what's happening in the person's life at that moment. I don't know if that makes any sense. This album's just really good. And number 1, we have the one that everyone was probably expecting, but we have Javelin by Sufjan Stevens. His sincerity, his brutally honest songwriting, and his experimentation all coalesce into one of the greatest soundscapes of the year. I have cried his album way too many times, but it's also so refreshing to hear a singer that has so much vulnerability like Sufjan does. Like, I just wanted to give him a hug after listening to this, because the man's been through so much. Given the context of this releasing after the death of his longtime partner, the whole album just feels so bittersweet. Ugh, my camera died. Oh my god, okay, so I'm just gonna try to finish this really quickly. There are elements of the Age of Odds thrown in here, combined with the despondence of Carrie and Lowell, and the playful choirs of Illinois and Michigan. Javelin is Sufjan's homecoming, and what a homecoming it is. Sufjan Stevens has already proved himself as a great singer, songwriter, and producer, but Javelin will cement him as one of the greatest contemporary folk singers of our time. If you haven't already, please listen to this and grab some tissues. I'm Julia. Thank you so much for watching, and yeah, that was my top 25 albums of the year. Please let me know what your favorites are in the comments below, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye!